names. We're going to go over some logistics in just a minute, but would love to introduce myself with my scratchy voice. In all likelihood, it seems like a couple of members of my family have had COVID-19, and I have the residual cough as a souvenir. So if I launch into spluttering sessions, please forgive me. I'm hoping that won't happen. My name is Brigitte Marshall, and I'm the Director of School Services for SEEDS, and I'm delighted to be leading this conversation today. It is the fourth in our series of sharing space during shelter in place. One of our staff members came up with that beautiful title. And today we're going to be focusing our conversation around hooks and activators. Those things that happen that just hook us and cause us to have a really strong emotional reaction over which we have very little control. Not that we're making any assumptions about things that might be happening in your households in this context of shelter in place. But it does feel like an important opportunity, an invitation for us to think about the kinds of things that we are challenged with in our reactions to others. I'm joined today in a support role by our wonderful programs coordinator, Selena, who is waving and smiling at those of you who are seeing her. And Selena's just going to go over a few logistics with you about the Zoom platform and how we can function together in our little virtual community for this hour.
Great, thank you, Brigitte, and thank you all for being here. I see a lot of familiar faces from our last few trainings, so thank you for bearing with me for some repeat instructions. I'm going to ask folks, and I'm going to invite you to go to the 3 dots that's in the corner of your own icon, and you can click to rename yourself, and we would like to ask you to rename with your first name, your gender pronouns, and your location if you would like. And then we also will be recording this session for internal and external training purposes. If you'd not like to be recorded when you're speaking, then please feel free to turn off your video and or audio and use the chat box. And then
I'm not finding my 3 dots, sorry. Where are they again?
Yes, so you'll see at the top of your name, the top of your image, there'll be 3 dots in blue. Do you see it?
I only have a pin. I don't want a pin. I don't have 3 blue.
You have to hover in the right corner above, in the right, up to the right corner, just hover with your cursor and it'll appear.
I really want to rename myself. I was loving how that, but I'm going to have to do it in another time because there's no hovering. But
there's another way of doing it. You can click on the participants list at the bottom ribbon, and you should.
Oh, got it. Okay, perfect. Thank you so much. I'm going to do it. Thank you.
Great. And then we don't have any folks calling in, to my understanding. If you're calling in, please let me know now and I can give you further instructions. Okay, sounds good. Seems like no one's calling in, and then I'll turn it back to Brigitte.
All right. So before we get into the content of our conversation today, we would like to spend just a second reflecting on where we are in time and place. Some of you I've had the pleasure of working with in the context of implementation of restorative practices and restorative justice. And we always like to take time to exercise humility and acknowledge that our ability to implement restorative practices and restorative justice is because we can learn those practices from ancient civilizations, many of which European nations did their absolute best to squash and repress. And so when we take up those practices, we do so with great humility and deep respect. And similarly, we like to acknowledge that we are currently in place on lands that were taken from, in our case, because we're anchored in Berkeley, the Ohlone people. And for those of you who are calling in from outside of the Bay Area, Selena has posted some resources so that you can identify on whose lands you are now existing. But I'd like to share with you our land acknowledgement. We are gathered on the unceded land of the Ohlone peoples. I ask you to join me in acknowledging the Ohlone, their elders, both past and present, as well as future generations. Seeds acknowledges that it was founded upon exclusions and erasures of many indigenous peoples, including those on whose land our organization is located, and on which many of us are sitting now. So I appreciate you joining with me in that engagement. I'm hoping that everybody has clicked on the chat box so that it pops up. If you look at the black ribbon at the bottom, you'll see chat. You click on that, you get the chat box. Selena will be posting a variety of different things through the course of our conversation today. And I'd like to invite everybody to spend just a minute and reflect on an interpersonal challenge that you are working hard to manage right now, probably in the context of your shelter in space reality. An interpersonal challenge that you're working hard to manage. And if you can just post a few words in the chat box to everybody, hit enter, and we'll just get connected a little bit, sharing a few of our individual experiences. It has to be his way. Negative thinking, that's a hard one. Managing expectations, absolutely. How is this going to work? A few more. Wanting to maintain my relationships even though I want to end them. Yeah, the conflicts that we feel when we're in this very strange place of uncommon times. Clashing of parenting styles. I'm usually the one setting routines, but now the partner is on primary childcare duty and very adamant about his way being the right way. Yeah, when we are in close proximity, whoa, those different expectations really come into close contact with each other, communicating according to everyone's love language. Oh yes, we all have very different ways of needing to be cared for. So roommate's boyfriend is spending more time micromanaging my behaviors, seemingly to bring control to our shared unknowns. Oh gosh, that's a tough one. Yes, when your inner circle includes someone from outside the household. Yeah, well, thanks so much for those of you who shared. Those are really excellent examples of the kinds of things that can serve as hooks to activate us and cause strong emotional reactions and unearth really challenging feelings. Before we get into a little bit more consideration of what's going on when we get hooked and we're activated, I wanted to say just a few words about seeds for those of you who may not know very much about us. We're a small nonprofit organization based in Berkeley. We've been working in the community for just over 30 years. We're essentially a conflict transformation organization. We actually do work all over the Greater Bay Area, pretty much from Sacramento to San Jose. And on occasion, we do work in Southern California and other parts of California as well, but the Greater Bay Area is really our area. And our mission is to increase the capacity of individuals, groups, and organizations to build healthy relationships and to restore relationships in the face of conflict. So we describe ourselves as a conflict transformation organization. And we do our work through mediation, facilitation, training, and coaching. So we have those 4 modalities, and we offer those in the context of community settings, in schools, and also in places of business, in organizations. So wherever you are, if you need us, we have a way of being responsive and providing our services through those modalities of training, coaching, facilitation, and mediation. And I'm going to do a quick agenda review. If you could post the agenda in the chat box, that would be great, Selena. We've done a little connection activity where we were thinking about the things that we're struggling to manage. We're now doing our agenda review and agreements. And we're going to spend a little bit of time talking about what happens when we get activated. We're going to kind of dissect a little bit what's going on for us when something hooks us and we get activated. And we're going to introduce you to a very simple model that we have found very helpful at Seeds in developing a sense of understanding about what's going on with us. We're going to spend some time in breakout groups reflecting on our own activators and sharing to the extent that we feel comfortable with our breakout room partners. And then we're going to spend a little bit of time talking about our sort of self-de-escalation strategies and seeing if we can build a shared body of strategies that can be helpful in situations where we feel highly activated. And then we're going to spend a little bit of time sharing some additional resources with you, and then we're going to wish you well for the rest of your workday where you are staying home and staying healthy. And I have some agreements that I'm going to invite us all to step into. If we were meeting face to face, we would spend a little bit more time co-creating some agreements that would serve our community well for the time that we are choosing to spend together. But instead, I'm going to offer you an invitation to step into these agreements for our time together today. We're going to invite you to engage in both and thinking. If ever there was a moment when it is incredibly important for us to be expansive in our understanding of what's going on with people, this is the moment, these uncommon times. So our invitation is to engage both and thinking. We really want to invite you to engage in self-care and community care. I loved the collaborative troubleshooting to get Suzanne into being able to change her name. That's the spirit of what will help us all to thrive in these times. We're going to invite you to listen for learning and to understand where your growth zone is at risk of tipping into panic zone. I don't think that anything today is at risk of nudging us into panic zone, but as we are stretching ourselves and inviting ourselves to think about new things, new ideas, new ways of approaching situations, when we become disoriented, we can be at risk of feeling that sense of panic, which shuts down our learning. So we want to intentionally sit in a place of growth and not lean into that panic moment. And then our last invitation is to expect, invite, and accept lack of closure. In an hour-long conversation, we are not going to send you away with a neatly wrapped up package with a bow, but what we may do is provoke and excite and invite some ideas and some thinking around which we hope you will do additional work and thinking as you continue your shelter in place. So that's what we're going to do. That's how we're going to do it. Let's jump into some content, and I'm going to ask Selena to share a slide with you. And I am going to tell you about an experience that I have been having in my own family. There's something that happens pretty frequently. The 2 young people I have in my home right now are older teenagers, 15 and 19. And this is not something that is terribly present now because we've collectively done a lot of work on it. But there was a period of time during which I would prepare food and serve food to my young people, and I would place it on the table, and one or other of them would say something along the lines of, "Oh, that's what we're having," or, "Oh, leftovers again." And my reaction to those comments was very big and often very loud and very angry. I've been known to slam plates on the table. I've been known to grab serving dishes off the table and throw them in the sink. And it was super disorienting for me because I tend to think of myself as a relatively calm and thoughtful person. I don't have a fiery temper, except apparently in this kind of situation. And it was kind of scary for me that this external event that on the face of it didn't seem to be that big of a deal was causing this incredibly strong, emotional, angry reaction in me. And my natural inclination was to rationalize it and to say, well, who could blame me? My privileged, entitled, indulged children are ungrateful and inconsiderate, and they have no right to say that to me. I think that they need to change their behavior. They are making me turn into this crazy mom, and I don't like it, and it's really all their fault because they're just ungrateful and entitled about their food and their preferences. And of course, that wasn't at all helpful because it just precipitated conflict, and there was a great deal, and raised voices, and the kind of interaction that I don't particularly want or like to have with my children. And fortunately, working where I work and having the colleagues that I have, I had many opportunities to dissect this experience that I was having, take it to pieces, reflect on it, and talk it through. And in doing so, I recognized that I really had an opportunity and an invitation to have a very different kind of response. And instead of leaning into judging, explaining, defending, etc., my opportunity was to think about what the heck was going on with me. And we came up with this model to help us think about, talk about, and share with others this notion of an opportunity to understand our personal filters. So you can see the external event over on the left side of the screen. In my case, the external event was serving food and my children's reaction to it. That external event impacts me as a result of my personal filters. My lived experiences cause me to experience the current external events in a certain kind of way. So for me, it was, okay, so what the heck is going on with me? What is it about my life experience that causes me to have this reaction? And it was actually my dad who was the answer to my pondering. I called him up, I talked to him about this, and we reflected together on the experiences that I had as a child being raised by him and my stepmother. And I named a long list of really strict and rigid rules that they had around food, from how much butter you were allowed to put on a baked potato, to not taking food from a serving dish and putting it on your plate if you weren't going to finish every scrap of food on your plate. And if you did leave food on your plate, it was going to appear at the next meal. And having to buy eggs from my stepmother if I wanted to bake a cake for the family. And on and on and on it went, all of these rules around food and food as a resource. And what we unpacked together is that my father and stepmother were born during the Second World War, and they experienced food scarcity for a full decade after the war. And although I, in my own personal lived experience, did not experience food scarcity, we know that trauma is generational and it gets transmitted across generations. And what became abundantly clear is that I have had a set of, I'm so sorry, I have a neurotic rescue dog who likes to bark at shadows. Freddie, excuse me 1 second. Cole, can you keep him in your room? Apologies for that. Freddie wanted to get in on the act. So I have embodied, I have digested all of these issues around food, and I am now manifesting them with my own children. So what I want to invite us to do, if we can go back to our screen, I'm going to do a quick time check. Oh, we're doing great. I want to invite any questions or comments, and if you go to the participants list, you have an opportunity to raise your hand. There's a little button that you can press. If you have a question or comment, I would just invite you to raise your hand and I'll call on you. And we're going to break into breakout groups and have an opportunity to reflect together on some experiences that you may have had that cause you to get hooked and feel very activated in response. But I wondered if there are any immediate reflections or questions that folks have right now. I'm wondering if anybody is relating to my example, if you experience the same kind of thing. Yeah, I see some folks physically raising their hands. Yeah, I do think it can be a generational thing. Obviously, it can be a situational thing also. And I'll say just a few more words about the benefit that I've derived from having done that work. I don't feel that I have the same reaction anymore. My teenagers haven't stopped doing what they're doing. But what it has created for me is an opportunity to have a different kind of conversation with them. Because I do still have feelings about their sense of entitlement and their privilege and their lack of regard and respect for food as a resource and the effort that it took to prepare it. But screaming and yelling at them and calling them names was obviously not a very productive way of nurturing their deepened level of understanding about my perspective. So I think having done this reflection for myself with other people to sort of unpack it has really created an opportunity for a different kind of conversation, which has felt very de-escalating in my own family situation and very expansive for me in both directions with my kids and with my parents. It really opened up an opportunity to have very interesting conversations with them as well. So seeing no questions, what we're going to do is I'm going to invite us to hold silence for a few minutes, 2 or 3 minutes. And Selena is going to share in just a second a tool that will actually be part of a document we're going to provide to you at the end of our conversation, which is, it's just a little reflection tool asking you to think about some situations that cause you to feel highly activated. And see if you can name 2 or 3. And I just want to emphasize that these are not things that mildly irritate you. These are things that cause you to have a reaction that surprises you. It's the, whoa, where did that flash of anger just come from? And it can be unnerving and disorienting when that anger or worry or concern pops in a way that you didn't anticipate. It catches you off guard. So see if you can identify 2 or 3 things and then start the individual reflection process for yourself about where you think that might have come from. And you perhaps already know, you may already have done this dissection and reflection. And if that's the case, then this is an opportunity and an invitation to revisit it and go a little bit deeper. So we will hold silent space. And while that is happening, Selena is going to be grouping you into 2s and 3s. So at the end of the silent reflection period, I will let you know that momentarily you will be invited to join a breakout room. And you'll see a little screen a little pop-up screen, and you'll just click on that. You'll join your breakout room. And then in your breakout room, you'll be with 2 or 3 other people. The invitation is, to the extent that you feel comfortable, share one of your examples with each other. So you can name the event or issue or phrase or thing that sets you off and generates that spark of anger or distress or concern. And then share, to the extent that you feel comfortable, what you think is the root cause. What is the underlying lived experience that causes you to have that hooked activation? Are there any questions about the activity? All right, so we will set a timer. Let's do, I think we're doing just fine for time. So let's do a 3-minute silent reflection, starting now. So I'm going to invite everybody to come back from your reflective time, and Selena's going to put you in your breakout groups now, and pick one to share out with your group members and see if you can help each other with the reflection of what is at the root cause, what's at the heart of why that is such an activator for you. And we'll be in these breakout groups for just, let's see, 6 or 7 minutes. So it's going to be very quick, 2 minutes of sharing out each. Thank you, Selena.
Brigitte, you don't have to join your room.
Okay. I'm going to invite us just very quickly, if there's anybody who feels like they had an aha about themselves. We're obviously not going to share about other people's conversations, but if in the course of sharing with your breakout roommates, you had a little aha moment and would like to share it with folks.
Oh,
Cameron, thank you.
yeah, I just wanted to, I don't know if it was I wish it were an aha moment, but it's just more of a reminder of restraint of pen and tongue, as that when we are activated, not to immediately feel the need to say what it has to be, like this emergency emotion needs to get out through words that I'm probably going to want to take back.
Yeah, what a beautiful reflection. And it's so hard to do, right? Because our immediate defensive response is, you've done something to me, and my reaction is justified because you've done it to me. And I think one of the really fascinating things about hooks and activators is this duality that we have to be aware of, both with regard to ourselves and with others. So when it's our own reaction, the little moniker I like to keep present for myself is, it's not about them. So as I am manifesting anger or distress or upset, I say to myself, it's not about them. This is my stuff. And then by the same token, when I see someone else who is activated, I say to myself, it's not necessarily all about me. Now, I want to be reflective about what parts are my responsibility, because I may very well have said something insensitive or provocative or inappropriate. And it may also very well be the case that the individual who is reacting to me is manifesting their own past trauma or lived experience. And so the wisdom to not take it completely personally while holding responsibility for what is mine to own, I think can be a super helpful reflection. Thanks for lifting that up, Cameron, really appreciate it. I want us to spend just a couple of minutes generating together some ideas for how we can help ourselves, whether it's self-soothing, de-escalation, calming strategies, reflection strategies. And I think our group is small enough that we can just open this up. I don't think we need to raise our virtual hands, just chime in. If anyone has a good strategy that you have found helpful for yourself, and that others might appreciate hearing about. I can kick us off by sharing a good old-fashioned one that my grandparents would say to me all the time: breathe. Right? It feels a little bit like a cliche, but it is so incredibly true. And it's actually physiologically true as well, because when we stop and pause and take a big breath and allow oxygen to get into our system, it actually has a physiologically calming effect. It's not just psychological in terms of, okay, hold on, before that comes out of your mouth, take a breath and get a little sense of control. I know in the situation that I shared with you with my kids, before that plate goes slamming down on the table, I literally say to myself, take a breath. And then I imagine the breath coming underneath the plate and it wafts down a little more gently. So I combine breathing with visualization of something that softens the physical things that are in the mix of the situation. And that has helped me enormously. I know you've got some. Yeah, Alison, go ahead. You're muted, Alison.
Yeah, I tend to want to leave the house, and I have to be, I don't want to abandon the people I'm with, but I kind of need to go for a long walk and physically move. There's something about movement that helps me kind of process. So I'm actually thinking about getting my bike working again, because I think not only walking the dog, just getting out of the house and then just really sitting with the feelings that I'm having and trying to understand where they're coming from, or at least to acknowledge and name the feelings first, but then to recognize. And this beautiful analogy someone used the other day was that every feeling I'm having is like a thread of a tapestry that leads back to some part of my life. And so it's kind of like it's so complex, you know, it's not an easy thing to acknowledge, but if I just keep kind of sitting with the feelings and kind of feeling those feelings, it will help me to kind of understand where they're coming from and what part of my life did I once have this response. Getting in touch with that versus the blaming of the other person and finding fault in the other person and fostering or festering in the resentment, because those feelings aren't constructive. But if I take ownership, then I can actually heal myself from past harm that's been done in a place in my life.
Yeah, there's two things I really want to lift up there. Thanks so much for naming them. One is physical space, and we often underestimate the benefit and value of setting space between us and the individual that was party to our activation in that moment. And I think about this a lot in interactions with young people, and often they are very wise about what they need. And when they say, I just don't want to talk about it now, and adults often try and insist that we're going to talk about it now, I try to remind myself that what they're expressing is what they need to handle what has activated them. And what you articulated about, sometimes you just need to get out of the house. You need to set physical space between you and the situation or the people or the incident that was a party to the activation. And then the other thing that you named that feels super important is actually allowing yourself to feel. So not getting completely tied up in the activation emotions and feelings and sensations, but giving yourself permission to feel what is the root cause, and being very intentional about creating some time where you are going to say, okay, come on in, feelings. Let's spend some time together and get to know each other to deepen the understanding. Yeah, two really beautiful things. Lisa, I see your hand raised. Yeah, and then Suzanne will come to you next.
Hi, I don't have an answer so much as I have a more specific question in the same vein. I feel like I can handle my sadness or anger or a lot of other emotions that could come up pretty easily, or, you know, I can breathe through them. I have techniques for those, but not with anxiety. And with anxiety, and that's the emotion that I have been, I was talking about in my small group, was just what happens when I feel anxious, and the fact that this anxiety just hangs on for a long time. And so I'm curious if any of you who didn't have anything to say yet might have some insight on how to deal with anxiety in particular.
Yeah, what a great question, Lisa. And it feels very resonant for me. Certain things will just hook me into a frenzy of anxiety or a dread or a sort of creeping anxiety. Yeah, I'm feeling pretty connected to those emotions right now. Anyone have any reflections to share? I see Corey's hand raised. Is this? Do you have a reflection to offer to Lisa? I think you're muted, Corey.
Yeah, sorry, my screen collapsed for a second.
Oh dear.
Had to find my button. So I have dealt with anxiety a lot. And I think the biggest thing for me is really, it's a practice, but has been recognizing sort of this deeper thing of, okay, what is happening right now is anxiety. Similarly to what is happening, like I think we're talking a lot about, you know, we're our hooks and activators, like being able to recognize like, oh, this is an activator. Oh, I'm getting hooked right now. Oh, there's some deeper thing coming up. And for me, like recognizing, oh, this is anxiety, has been really helpful to name that, and allow me to then sort of feel like, okay, I can then handle this because I know what this is. I think for me, getting lost in anxiety sometimes is not being able to recognize what is happening. And so being able to kind of take that pause and breath and recognize, oh, this is what is happening. It is anxiety. Therefore, it's not about this immediate situation. It's a larger, deeper thing for me that is happening. Similar, like I would say that an anxiety is a activated response for me. And so being able to recognize this is a response. Okay, what do I need to do now to take care of that response has been really helpful.
Beautiful. Thank you, Corey, for articulating that so extraordinarily well. It reminded me of a coaching strategy that I have been trained to use, and it is to encourage people to experience parts of themselves, so in this case, an anxious part, as a protector, and to think about that anxiety response as part of you trying to protect yourself from something. So it is well intended. It is in service of you. And thinking about it in that way can help to de-escalate its negative impact. So if we think about it as, just as Corey mentioned, oh, I recognize this is anxiety, I'm feeling anxious. It's a feeling, it's an emotion, and it comes from past experiences, and I've just been hooked to experience this in this particular moment. And the purpose of this feeling and emotion is protection. It's a part of me that is seeking to take care of me. And then there's an opportunity to experience it a little bit differently. Rather than debilitating and undermining your effectiveness, it's actually seeking to protect and support and take care of you. And Suzanne, I think you might have had a thought on this.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I mean, one thought on anxiety is just to feel into my agency about whatever it is. So like trying to say like, oh, there's, you know, all these things that I do not have control over, but trying to find something in a similar wheelhouse where there are things that I do have control, and just, so that's something that has helped me with anxiety. But in terms of the question that you had previously asked, I was thinking like there's the phrases used in Buddhism, and you know, for anybody it's not your thing, but I really love this practice of forgiveness. And it's been really helpful to me when I get activated. So you do it like for yourself, for it's like for any way that I've caused you harm knowingly or unknowingly out of my fear, or my anger, or my confusion. You know, may I learn to forgive you. May I, you know, plant the seeds of forgiveness, even if they do not grow. May I allow you to be a student of life, still learning life's lessons, which I just absolutely love. So I do it for myself. I do it for the other person, like going through those phrases. And if I do it a lot, then I'll just be like, whew, it'll gently get me out of that activation often.
Thank you so much for sharing that. Would you be kind enough to post those in the chat box?
I can, although I've like kind of adjusted them to myself, so I can share the ones that just kind of come organically from me, and then
Absolutely.
feel free to, you know, roll with it and make your own.
Yes, we're not prescribing, we're offering up, right? We're sharing. Anyone else have a strategy that you found particularly helpful, or that you've observed somebody else employing?
Hi, this is Beth in Illinois. Something that for me is tried and true, having had experiences with massive anxiety and PTSD, is the practice of breathing in and holding it for me, I do about 4 seconds, and then breathing out and holding it for 4 seconds. It's really helpful to let your limbic system know that you're not running away from tigers and that sort of thing. It's profoundly helpful in my experience.
Yes, so many of these strategies are grounded in physiological fact, right? In scientific fact about the way our bodies work. And, you know, some of us are very analytical and scientific in our approach to these situations, and I think that can be very helpful. I think we have time for one more. Anyone have a good strategy that works really well for you? Well, you're all looking very serene and calm and unactivated right now. So long may that continue, and may your responses to situations and individuals that hook you and make connections with past hurts and traumas in a way that causes activation. My hope and wish for you is that you can tap into strengths of reserve and understanding and reflection that support you to be able to self-de-escalate and express a very large degree of care and compassion when you see other people in your immediate circles who are activated. And goodness knows there is plenty in these uncommon times that that can serve exactly that function. I was sharing with my kids the other day about the very strange dreams that I've been having, that are sort of catastrophe, terrible things happening dreams, close to nightmares, I would say. And both of my young people said, me too. And there are clearly so many different ways that we're manifesting the anxiety and the trauma and the fear and the concerns that are manifest around us at present. I just want to acknowledge that our current context is a really ripe ground for these kinds of large reactions. So I so deeply appreciate the opportunity to spend this time with all of you, allowing us to be a little bit thoughtful and to build our psychological, socio-emotional muscle around our responses. We'd love to share with you a little bit of information about some of the other things that Seeds does. And while Selena is posting that information in the chat box, I am just going to mention that we are a very small nonprofit. The vast majority of our revenue is generated from fee-based services, many of which have been cancelled. We're doing our best to transfer our services into online platforms and virtual experiences, but we are, of course, experiencing some pretty significant financial impact from the current situation. And if you feel so moved, donations would be very welcome to our organization. We obviously want to keep the backbone and the thread of everything that we're doing so that we can reignite our services when things start to return to normal a little bit. Selena has posted the various different ways you can be in touch with us. We are definitely shifting to an online mediation delivery mode, I would describe. And we have some trainings coming up, including RJ in schools. And please feel free to follow us on social media. Selena has posted those there also. Such a pleasure to spend time with all of you. I wish I could have been in all of your breakout rooms and a fly on the wall and listening into the conversations, but clearly they were rich. And I'm just going to invite us to post in the chat box a one-word reflection to carry us out and back into our day. So a one-word reflection, and be sure to post it to everyone. Forgiveness, stimulating, calm. Remembering. grateful, patience, gratitude. Pause. Well, what wonderful thoughts to take us back into the second half of our day. These are my wishes for all of you collectively. Thanks so much for joining us. The fifth in our series of, I always get it wrong, shelter in place while sharing space while sheltering in place. The fifth in our series is on Friday. Our wonderful colleague Latrice will be offering that, so perhaps see some of you for that. Stay well, stay home, stay healthy. Thanks so much for spending this time with us. Bye-bye.